Hi, I'm Tom Hendrickson from the DevOps Online Summit. Today, I'm joined by Chris Bergh, CEO, founder, and head chef at Data Kitchen. Chris, introduce yourself to the people here at the DevOps Online Summit.
Hello, everyone at the DevOps Online Summit. So I'm Chris. I run a company called Data Kitchen that is doing kind of a sister to what all you were working on called DataOps. And so I, like a lot of you, have a career that spent about 15 years doing software. Companies like NASA and a research lab at MIT and startups and Microsoft. And I wrote a lot of code, managed a lot of teams, and I sort of lived through the agile movement, right? And about 2005, I got this bright idea that I should switch, and I'm going to go to this easier field where people analyze data. And I'm like, man, I'm a software engineer, no problem. No worries. And so I was the chief operating officer. So I had people, we did data analysis for kind of healthcare companies, right? And we had hoped to build a software product. And so I was kind of a data engineers, data scientists, people who did data visualization. And man, my life really sucked. Like things were breaking left and right. And I never could go fast enough. Like everything had 10 follow-up questions, right? And then the people I hired, they're smart, and they had to we had people who like to write Python, people who like to write R, people who like nice UIs, people who like, using command line. And how do you have all these different tools and techniques? And then how do you go fast? And then how do you not break things? And so I had to actually, having read at the Agile Manifesto, and I realized that was the start, but data is a bit different. And there's a couple aspects of what makes data different. It's like software, but not. And so I started a company with my two other co-founders, and we've been trying to talk about evangelize DataOps to anyone who will listen since then.
Yeah, that's a term that I've heard thrown around, and I'm really glad you're here, Chris, to kind of level set everybody. So how do you explain DataOps when you're talking to people?
Well, when you build a system, right, it's got a database and it's got a front end. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to do in DevOps is iterate on the development of that schema. It's transactional schema, or it's UI or backend. Mm-hmm. And so there's a customer of the data that system creates that persists in a database or the log files. And that team that looks at it is usually called an analytics team or a data science team. And and so they're taking data that your application's creating and trying to do something with it to get insight. And so they're a customer of yours, of your DevOps group. And you may think about, so I had a conversation this morning. It's a company about 80 people. They're a startup. They've got a software team of about 20 people, and they have a data team of about 4 people. And so the data team takes data from the software program and also does some other stuff. And what's the data team's job is like, hey, is there something in this data that I can use to make my business better? Is there reports that I've got to produce? And so there's categories of people who look at it. There's data engineers who put it in a more format that's amenable to analysis. There's people who run models on it that say, okay, we're going to cut the data or segment it. There's people who visualize it. There's people who govern it. And these roles are sort of fairly established in the data industry. And what the guy said is, hey, look, we pushed out a new build in Jenkins, and that build had a schema change. Happened on Friday. All the tests ran. Everything was right. Saturday morning at 2 a.m., all the reports broke, right? Because you have a customer in the data and analytics team. And how did they know it broke? Well, they didn't actually know it broke, the data and analytics team. They learned about it kind of Monday morning when the executive looked at it and goes, this is wrong. And so that's pretty common, actually, that the data team is kind of takes the crap that everyone else gives them and then discovers it because their customer finds it, which is, I think, a problem, right? And then there's another problem in data teams where it's kind of a hero mode. Like they're in there changing stuff late at night. It sort of reminds me, I worked on a very, very first consumer website, like in 1997. And we had like people chatting. It was like a mix up of like Facebook and recommendations, like this early website. I was on the website on a SGI server, like changing the code, rebooting the server while people are on it.
Oh, yay.
right? Not exactly what you're supposed to do, but that
Yes.
was what, and I was being a hero, right? Because I was like working late. And there's a lot of heroism in data teams. So there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of heroism, and there's not a lot of consideration for them because they're a different group. And so the purpose of data ops is to make those things disappear, right? So can't you actually, during your software CI process, call all those data and analytic systems with the change and say, hey, look, does this work for you?
Yeah.
Simple. Run it, test it, build it. And then second, allow people who on these teams who make changes, maybe the changes in once they've gotten the data from the DevOps team, from the transactional systems, they're building this analytic system, which is a lot like a factory. Allow them to run that factory that produces Toyota cars and not AMC Pacers, right? High quality, and allow them to sort of pick up an assembly line on a portion where you can assemble something, a workstation, and change something quickly, and then know if they change something that it works. And so I think it's pretty similar to what we do in software, but it's different. The ideas, the concepts are similar that come because everything in DevOps sort of some ways traces back to lean and Deming and process improvements. And so I think DataOps to end is sort of just a ripoff of ideas from DevOps and lean manufacturing and said, hey, they work over here.
Yeah.
And so we've got a software company, but in order to get the ideas across, we had to write a manifesto and I didn't write them, but we had a writer write some books with us to talk about the ideas. So I'm here to say, you've got to the DevOps people, remember your data people. They exist.
Yeah, don't look away. Help
look
them
away.
Out.
Yeah. And I'm trying to build a system that allows you to pull the pain forward, right? And say, okay, I want to remember my data people. Well, I just want to call their pipelines from my CI system and have them run automatically to tell if they work. My change broke what they did.
Yeah. You talked about a lot of good things there, Chris. I do want to touch on something just quickly. Why do you think, as you mentioned, this heroism that's in kind of, I guess, in the technology area, the development area, that seems to be pervasive in a lot of places? Is it because of bad practices, you think, or what do you think? Why is that always kind of rear its head?
Well, my real opinion is because we're a bunch of introverts, right?
Yes.
And we want to look good in front of people. And one way to look good is just to create with our hands. And we go off and we build this amazing thing and we go, look, aren't we awesome? And people go, wow, you created that. You're awesome. And, whether it's a hairball or not, they create it. And so I think there's part of what we all want to do is get good feedback. And so we're tempted to go the heroism route.
Yeah.
Right? And what's compounded in data is there's a lot of iterations that have to happen in data just to look at the data to see if it's right. Let alone iterating on the application, you've got to iterate on the data. So there's these 2 iteration cycles that make it hard. And it's really tempting to iterate, and then boom, oh, I'm done. and it's sort of it's just in my mind, the software industry 20 years ago. You're rushing to be the hero. You're hoping that things will work. And then you get all that stuff done, and then you build this big old hairballs that you've got to manage. And then the recruiter calls and you've got a new job. And you're like, oh, well.
Something else. Somebody else's problem. Oh, that's great, Chris. Oh, so why do you think, Chris, why do so many companies fail as they try to embrace data ops?
Well, I think most companies are not embracing data ops, to be blunt, not in the same way DevOps is. It's still really new. Data ops is maybe 8-10 years behind DevOps in terms of awareness and acceptance. And so companies are now starting to have the kind of overall organizational change that came from DevOps, DevOps teams, DevOps process changes, consultants. So the industry is just starting to kick into gear. And actually, I think it's a real opportunity for people who have a DevOps background to learn a new area and take those same ideas and work with the data engineering team or the data science team and apply those same sort of skills. And I think it's a real growth area. But I don't think it's here now. We're sort of behind. And so I think companies are learning.
Yeah.
and they're getting better. And I think it's also, what happens at lunch. You're at lunch and you got a data scientist and he's saying, yeah, it takes me 8 weeks to get 10 lines of SQL into production. And then the guy who's running the website goes, yeah, I just did it. Boom, on his phone. And like, oh, okay, well, maybe we should do that.
Yeah.
So I think partly is that people should talk to each other and compare notes. And I think I think data people are going to, they're going to stop seeing that they're an exception. They just got to build the same sort of opsy stuff that we did in software. Yeah, build the process.
Yeah. So that, I guess, as a strategy to fix it would be kind of, it sounds like partially awareness of DataOps, but then these strategies that you mentioned to fix it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm wondering if like all the DevOps people should just shame all the data people. like
shame as a tool.
You're doing what? Ew. Oh, you're doing it manually? It takes 6 weeks? You mean you don't know if there's a problem in production? Ew. So I'm thinking that's it.
Yeah. Shame as a strategy.
So I think everyone here, find someone who does data in your organization and just shame them. And
yes.
that's my solution. I don't know. I think it's just going to, like a lot of things, data is a relatively new field. And fortunately, I got into it 15 years ago, but there's just been a raft of people who've gotten in the last 5-7 years. And they're just, you get into the field, you think the data scientist is the sexiest job of the 21st century. Things are going to be wonderful. I'm going to be doing algorithms and talking to the CEO and changing the world. And have all these other sort of problems. And I think that's what's happening too, is the field's grown and people are starting to get less entranced with the latest model, acronym, cool tool, and realizing that there's more systemic problems. And that also happened in software, right? We went from two-tier to 3-tier apps and then app servers. And now it's like, well, we're not going to go to 5-tier or 6-tier apps. Right? You got to work on our process.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see, Chris, this DataOps picking up in certain sectors more than others, or what do you see?
Well, it's funny for us. Since we're selling software, right? We got to have people who buy it. So it's big companies like healthcare companies and financial services, the usual suspects of companies who like have money to buy software. But it's also organizations where, like this, startup is just you have someone, the guy who called us in is runs a software team and he's like, this data stuff is really broken.
Yeah.
And like, wow, how do I fix it? And so I think that's also, people are just realizing there's a small amount of people who have made the transition from the DevOps software world into the data world, and they're not liking what they see.
Yeah. So, Chris, you've shared a lot with us today. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think, for the people, I would just encourage people who, not to shame people, but the people who are on this to go talk to their data teams. It's actually a really big industry. It's really growing. It's very exciting. And, I think the kind of ideas that help the DevOps movement be successful and change the world are starting to change the world for data and analytic people. And they're your fellow nerds and they're suffering.
Yes.
And you can fix it.
Help a suffering nerd today.
Help your suffering nerds. That's my closing thought.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
All right. Glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. On behalf of Chris Bergh, I am Tom Hendrickson for the DevOps Online Summit.